Okay guys, welcome back to another episode of Project Moonshot. And this is part 5 for the Smith space program, or whatever we're calling it. Today we're doing our first scientific satellite, and if you read this contract, it says, please note that using the Kerbalism mod, this contract does not complete after the intended 120 minutes. Feel free to use Alt F12 to complete the contract. Okay, I didn't know that, I didn't read it. I launched this exact satellite like 6 to 8 times before I actually read that and did it. So yeah, I have all these satellites in orbit, do nothing. Very sad. Anyway, moving on. This is the rocket and the payload that will do it. It's pretty much the same rocket as we used for our first satellite, except this is scientific, so it's got the Geiger counter on it. Alright, a little bit about the rocket. Is a triple core design with RD-103M motors. These are the 4 times upgraded motors. All 3 cores are the same length and dimension, the only exception being the boosters have aerodynamic nose cones on top. The upper stage is a really efficient kerosene motor from 1956 to 1957 orbital rocketry. That is the same general stage as we used last time, although I stretched it a bit because of the increased payload we have to have. Actually, last time we needed to have a periaps of, I think, 300. Now it's between 200 and 900, so it's actually not as rough. So we just ran our main engine to depletion, waited till apoaps, well, just before that actually, and fired the spin motors to settle the fuel and light that engine up. So now we're just burning sideways, building up orbital velocity. Not really much to talk about there. If you look, there's those 3 spin motors on the bottom of that stage. They're the things that I'm using to settle the fuel. The avionics package is actually on this stage before the long pencil part. The reason for that is the pencil part just can barely have any weight on it, because that whole thing needs to make orbit. So there's just the necessities. There's some scientific stuff on it, stuff for the contract, some solar panels and some batteries. And even with all those things, it got a little heavy. So, and if you see, when we detached it there, we have 6 spin motors on it, all angled. So when we fire it, it induces a really fast spin and also settles the fuel for the AJ-10. That, believe it or not, took a lot of figuring out to work. I failed this launch about 60 times, but there it is. We deploy our magnetometers, and there's our first scientific satellite. Now it's not going to auto-complete again. We have to do that ourselves. So I actually did that off stream after about 3 hours of freaking out. So now we're going to move right along to our first polar orbit satellite. And I was actually nervous about this because the rotation of the planet gives you about 400 to 500 meters a second in delta V. So being that I was barely making orbit, I was wondering, is this going to do it? So I just tried it with the same exact rocket, obviously. I did a quick roll program to align myself with the north trajectory. Now, something of note here. What you have to do is you have to burn slightly under your north vector, because if you don't, you won't be able to kill the rotational velocity of the planet, and that will cause the contract to fail. You would think this would be an easy thing for me to understand, but it took me about 2 or 3 tries. I was like, oh yeah, I gotta do this. So that's why you see me burning a bit off here, and when you see it switches to orbit, it'll be way up above the north vector. I'll have to fight it the whole way. This rocket is, again, it's stretched ever so slightly. I think it's like half a meter up on the pencil part, another half a meter on the upper stage there, but the boost stage is the exact same thing. As you can see, I'm not waiting to coast to apoaps on this one, because if I did, it would always fail. So I just kept one right after the other. Plus this ended up having more delta V than I actually needed, so that always helps. As you can see, again, the video is sped up, so you guys don't have to sit through like an 8-minute launch. these can get pretty rough. So if you see me there just fixing my staging, and again, when that pencil part decouples, it's got a spin induced on it, and what I figured out about that is I thought it was spinning too fast, so solar panels couldn't charge fast enough, so I put another set of spin motors on too. After the burn completes, they'll fire and they'll stop the spin. So, see, so it spins up there and it's spinning slower because I just took one set of them, twisted them the other way, and put them in a different stage. It doesn't need to spin all that fast, just needs to spin fast enough so that the power of that Aerobee AJ10 doesn't cause the thing to flip, which actually does happen. So as you can see, we're going up here, and yeah, there's the orbit complete. So we ended up with 145 by 4 million, and now let's just check the orbit for 2 minutes and fire our retro motors to stop the spin. Didn't really work out. I mean, it stopped the spin, but it induced a new one. But anyway, these solar panels aren't big enough to generate any meaningful electricity and keep those batteries charged. So, but now we're gonna go right to our first crewed launch. This is John. John is very brave. John died many times in simulations. What I figured out is all John needs to do is get above the carbon line. Everything else is just a bonus. So while we're flying up here, we're completing all types of crewed contracts, speed contracts, altitude contracts, you name it. So this is going to be worth a hefty amount of money. And the video is sped up a little bit, not all that much. But if you watch here, when Airwaps gets right around 120, I actually just cut the engines. We didn't run out of fuel, we just cut the engines. Because if you go any higher than that, you'll get more contracts done and get more money, but it doesn't matter because he won't survive the reentry. So we had to find a nice middle ground there. So there's the engines cut with 940 meters a second left in it, which hurt to do, but... And we're just coasting up here. John is enjoying his weightlessness. I was sweating bullets because I don't want to kill Kerbals. I had to figure out training for him. He actually had to take a training class for proficiency for the X1 and the X11 to be able to even go on this flight. So that added like 100 some days to our time. So I believe we're in like 1962 almost now, which is way farther ahead in the future than I really wanted to be. As you can see, we're coming back down now. And we're gaining speed. And I have that that thrust plate on the bottom there that's worked so well for me in the past. Yeah, well, apparently the crew cabin weighs more than that thing, so it just noses right in. And that's very scary because this thing could take no heat. Those parachutes could take no heat. And poor John is not the most strong Kerbal there is, so he tends to pass out a lot. But as long as he comes back, it's fine, you know? The way I see it, he doesn't really want to see what's happening anyway, because it's just horrifying and he'll die of a heart attack. So we're coming down here, gaining a lot of speed very quickly. Then the G-forces start piling on. Then we start spinning. Now would be a really good time to pass out, but he miraculously doesn't on this one and only occasion. We deploy the chutes. The chutes actually don't break. And yeah, here comes John. All the chutes deploy. Now would be a good time to make sure that crew report is going to get all the valuable science we can, because that's something about our program. We are severely lacking in science. It's really bad, and as the series goes on, you'll see how detrimental that is. In fact, we're at a point where we may not make it. I know I say that a lot, but I think it's pretty true this time. We're just coming down to the ocean, 3 meters a second. John's looks pleased with his life, I guess. Yeah, and this was really painful to sit and watch in normal time. So it's not only 4x physics warped, I have it warped playing back faster. So we recover the vessel. It of course doesn't work, and I freak out. Try it again. Boom. And there it is. You can see we got our crew updates. He's all good. We bagged 11 science out of that. We're up to 13.2. Yeah. We're just checking out our tech tree, and yeah, we're on February 1962, so that's pretty terrible. But we're still alive, so until next time, guys, have a good one.